Jasmine Pineda, fired, forgotten, and fighting alone, the untold story. She used to be the well-known character Jasmine Pineda, who infused each 90-day Fiancé episode with passion, tears, and fire. She was adored for her beauty, bravery, feelings, and even her rage. The show came to life because of her. But behind every grin and behind those brilliant TV lights, there was a lady fighting her own battles, alone. Jasmine's only goal when she joined 90 Day Fiancé was to start a new life with Gino Palazzolo, the man who had promised her everything. To be a part of that story, she had to leave behind her comfort, her friends, and even her pride. Millions of people saw her laugh, cry, and fall in love. She was authentic. She was unpolished. However, fame can be harsh, just like love. The final season aired months later. Even though Jasmine's name was still trending on social media and her videos were still going viral, she was worn out on the inside. Her eyes were exhausted when the makeup was removed, but the camera never captured it. After filming, the audience never witnessed her collapses. She never whispered, "I just want to be enough," to them. Then everything changed one morning. More quickly than wildfire, the news spread. Due to financial misconduct, Jasmine Pineda was fired from 90 Day Fiancé. Initially, no one took it seriously. Fans were heartbroken, furious, and perplexed. Was it accurate? Or just another story in the tabloids? However, TLC subsequently issued a statement verifying her dismissal. Her contract was up. Her picture was taken out of future advertisements. And there was a deafening hush after that. It began with murmurs. There were rumors that she had embezzled money. She is accused of embezzling funds intended for publicity and travel and using them for her own purposes. Trolls attacked, blogs conjectured, and newspapers wrote. The woman who previously had millions of admirers suddenly made headlines for all the wrong reasons. Jasmine made an attempt to talk. Her hands shaking and her eyes burning from restless nights, she went live on Instagram. "You think you know me, but you don't," she continued, her voice breaking. "Only what they want you to see is visible to you." However, nobody paid attention. The crowd that had previously applauded her suddenly turned away. There was vitriol in the comments section. She was accused of lying by some. She was referred to as greedy by others. She received what she deserved, according to some. Days went by. She didn't get a call from the show. Not the creators. She didn't make any pals on set. Not even Gino spoke. She never spoke of the man she once referred to as the love of her life. At 3 a.m, Jasmine was sitting at the window of her tiny Panama City apartment, watching the rain patter against the glass. She recalled the interviews, the laughs, the red carpets, and the bright lights. She recalled how it used to make her feel when someone said, "Jasmine, we adore you." Now there was only the sound of her own breathing, cold coffee, and an empty phone. She browsed through old pictures, including ones of her on set, with Gino, and in the red dress that fans loved. Now, every photo seemed to be a lie. Every recollection served as a reminder of her losses. And the silence was more painful than the hate when she eventually switched off her phone. Because the show wasn't the only thing that ended. It was who she was. Her universe. Her motivation to fight on. She muttered to herself that night, "Perhaps love was never meant for me. Perhaps I was only supposed to be observed." The rain continued to fall outside, erasing the glitter, the makeup, and the celebrity until only Jasmine remained, a woman devoid of everything, sitting in the dark with nothing but her truth. She still had a story to tell. However, she recognized for the first time that the same world that made her famous might also ruin her in a single day. And something inside of her was permanently broken by that realization. After Jasmine was fired, the days seemed to go on forever. Night turned into another restless dawn, and morning into night. Her world had come to a halt, while the world outside continued to move. Her opulent past now seemed like a harsh recollection. Once making headlines, her identity was now obscured by hate and rumors. She ceased accessing her social media accounts. The messages had become toxic. "You're a phony. It was due to you. Where is Gino right now?" Every comment went deeper than the one before it. And there was no sign of Gino, the man she had previously had complete faith in. He didn't call or message her, nor did he defend her. He silently unfollowed her on Instagram, and she saw it happen. She was more devastated by that small click than by any headline ever could be. Gino once made a lifelong pledge to her. "I'll be by your side no matter what the world says," he declared. However, he disappeared like vapor when the world truly turned against her. Jasmine's days were devoted to reliving old experiences. The battles, the laughing, and the love that seemed unshakable at one point. It all felt now like a dream she should never have had. With her eyes puffy from sobbing, she sat by herself and whispered to herself, "How is it possible for someone to adore you one day and then act as though you never existed?" The expenses began to mount. The brand sales vanished. She stopped receiving texts from her so-called friends on the show. As though Jasmine Pineda was simply another character who had fulfilled her role and been written out, everyone moved on. Jasmine, however, was still present. Breathing still. Still holding out hope. Still shattering. She would gaze at the ceiling at night, her mind racing. She recalled every second of her celebrity life, including the lights, the cameras, and the interviews. And she became aware of something unpleasant. She had never been adored by the world. They adored the portrayal of her on television, a chaotic, dramatic, and boisterous version. However, not the Jasmine who wept in private. It wasn't the Jasmine who put a lot of effort into making people laugh. Not the Jasmine who merely desired acceptance. One morning, she gazed at herself in the mirror. Her spirit was frail, her eyes weary. She didn't identify the woman in the rear for the first time. The mirror was of a person who had been crushed by her own aspirations, not a star. She had lost something that she would never be able to regain because of the scandal, the treachery, and the quiet. Her tranquility. She would occasionally step outside to simply enjoy the wind on her face and attempt to recall what it was like to be free. But she could feel the murmurs and the looks even there. She was well known. They stopped saying hello. They simply stared at her as if she were a narrative whose conclusion they already knew. She was reminded by every glance that she had turned into her own tragedy. However, a tiny voice continued to murmur deep within that silence. This shouldn't be the end. It was there, but it was faint, nearly lost in the agony. A voice that would not perish. Because Jasmine was still alive despite being broken. And perhaps, just possibly, there was a way to resurface as the genuine Jasmine, the one she had always concealed behind the cosmetics and the cameras, rather than as the Jasmine from television. She had no idea how. She had no idea when. But she was aware that the world would write her story for her if she didn't attempt. And this time, she wanted to write it herself. Before she went to sleep that night, for the first time in months, Jasmine muttered a different sentence. "I remain here." The tears returned, but they felt different this time. Not out of weakness, but from the minuscule glimmer of vigor that was gradually reviving. Even if the world had abandoned her, she was going to take a stance by herself and demonstrate that her tale didn't have to end with her fame. Months passed. The emptiness persisted even after the sounds subsided. Jasmine didn't go outside for a while. She stayed away from the world because she was terrified of the pity, the cruel laughter, and the gossip. Scandal has become synonymous with her name. Her reputation is a shadow of its former glory. However, pain has an odd way of changing individuals. Either you are totally destroyed, or you are rebuilt into something more powerful. And Jasmine gradually started to rise after all the tears, the restless nights, and the betrayals. After weeks of darkness, she finally opened her curtains one morning. The sunshine tenderly touched her face as it filled the room. She didn't cry for the first time in months. All she did was breathe. Although it wasn't yet happiness, there was serenity. And it had been a while since she had experienced tranquility. She sat by the window, brewed coffee, and jotted down the following in her notebook. I am powerless to undo what they caused to me. I can, however, choose my next course of action. She made a fresh pledge with that one sentence. Jasmine began modestly. She started instructing pupils who couldn't afford tutors in English online. No cameras. No followers. The world was never able to witness her voice, her patience, or her kindness. Slowly, people started to see a different Jasmine, not the flamboyant, irate TV personality, but a serene, kind person who still wished to assist others. She began posting straightforward films to social media. No cosmetics. No filtering. Just the truth from her. She discussed starting over after losing everything and mental health. She said, in order to finally meet the true version of yourself, sometimes the world must shatter you. Thousands were moved by her speech. Slowly, the hatred gave way to compassion. Comments started to come in. You were misinterpreted by us. You've gained strength. Now we see who you really are. Not everyone, however, was prepared to forgive. She was nonetheless referred to as a disgraced reality star by the media. Her return was ridiculed in some headlines. Her messages were ignored by TLC. What about Gino? Still no word. But this time, Jasmine didn't break. Because being forgotten was the worst thing she had previously experienced. She no longer required fame. Love wasn't necessary for her. She only needed herself. To cover her rent, she sold some of her old fancy clothing. Despite leading a simple life, she was happy. She told herself each morning, I'm not who they claim to be. I am the person I have chosen to be. Even so, loneliness returned on several nights. While the celebrity may have faded, the memories remained. She would occasionally watch old 90-day Fiancé clips with a heavy heart, not because she missed the celebrity, but rather because she didn't think her narrative was important. But suddenly, she became aware of something significant. Her tale was important, not because it was viewed by millions of people. However, it was genuine. She was down. She had suffered embarrassment. There had been nothing left for her. Nevertheless, she continued to breathe, teach, inspire, and rebuild. Her lowest point has been shown to the world. She wanted them to see how strong she was now. And for the first time in her life, Jasmine Pineda was able to prove her value without a contract, a show, or a guy. This time, she recognized the woman staring back at her when she stared at her reflection once more. With a gentle smile, she murmured, You made it through the storm. The time has come for it to grow in the sun. The world outside her window was still in disarray. However, there was peace within her heart. Once fueled by rage, the flames now had a purpose. And she was reclaiming the pen, despite the fact that others had rewritten her story. The resurgence had started. Not for publicity. Not to exact revenge. But for liberty. After several months, the affair was all but forgotten. However, fame only slumber, ready to awaken, and never really dies. And it did one morning. The headline of a well-known entertainment website read, Fans are divided over Jasmine Pineda, the former star of 90-Day Fiancé, trying to make a comeback. The article quickly gained popularity. Conversations resumed. Her strength was lauded by some. Others made fun of her efforts by stating, She is in a desperate situation. She is feigning humility. She will stop at nothing to regain her relevance. The sound had returned. The same callous, vicious voices. Jasmine didn't hide this time. After tying her hair back, she stood in front of her mirror and gazed directly into it. She whispered in a steady, quiet voice, "Let them speak. I've changed from who I was." Jasmine received an invitation to a live interview that week, which was her first in about a year. TLC wasn't involved. It was a little television network. It was a little internet station that prioritized the truth over rumors. At first, she hesitated. The idea of facing the world once more made her heart race. However, she had a gut feeling that it was time. The host began the interview by posing the query that everyone was curious about. "Did you actually mishandle the show's proceeds, Jasmine?" The silence fell. The comments froze as well. Jasmine inhaled deeply. Her voice remained steady despite the gleam in her eyes. She said, "I erred. I didn't steal, though. I paid the price because I trusted people I shouldn't have. I was gullible. I believed that friendship equated to stardom. I was mistaken." The host gave a nod. Jasmine went on, "I was upset with the world for months. With Gino, with TLC, with everyone who abandoned me. I understand now, though, that they didn't ruin me. They set me free. I don't live for their approval anymore. Peace is what I live for." Her remarks went viral, but not as rumors this time. They turned into a message, an emblem of endurance. Her interview clips went viral on Instagram and TikTok. Her quotes started to circulate. "She has changed. She's telling the truth. She merits another opportunity." They whispered in wonder, the same voices that had once torn her apart. Even Gino, who lived on the other side of the world, witnessed the interview. He remained silent. He didn't give a call. But he knew deep down that the woman he had known was no longer there. This Jasmine was different, more powerful, softer, smarter. Jasmine strolled home through the streets of Panama City following the interview. She smiled for the first time in years, not the camera-fake smile, but a genuine one as the wind tousled her hair. Because she came to the realization that she could move on without the forgiveness of others. She had forgiven herself already. There was just calm in her heart, not celebrity, scandal, or rage. And that tranquility was invaluable. Jasmine started utilizing her position to support women who had experienced betrayal, silence, or shame. She established a modest base for change rather than show. She was reminded of her own suffering by every story she heard, and she became stronger with each woman she assisted. Gradually, Jasmine Pineda was no longer associated with scandal. It represented power. At one point, she said, "I believed that losing everything was my penalty. However, I now realize that it was my debut." That was the reality. The moment she learned to stand was more significant than her fall. Jasmine gazed up at the sky as the sun sank that night and muttered, "I'm grateful that you broke me enough to properly rebuild me." She may never be seen by the camera again. It's possible that the fame will never return. However, Jasmine no longer needed it, because she had discovered something much more potent than celebrity. Liberty. That difficult time in Jasmine Pineda's life had been years ago. With fresh 90-day Fiancé seasons, new couples, and new drama, the world had changed. But a woman who had once been at the center of it all resided someplace, away from the din of gossip and television. Production calls and flashing cameras no longer woke Jasmine up. Outside her modest Panamanian beach bungalow, she awoke to the sound of breaking waves. Her life had fallen into a beautiful, serene silence. She brewed her own coffee every morning, went barefoot outside, and watched the sun rise. No makeup, no spotlight, and no rush. Just warmth. Just peace. However, that tranquility had been earned, through suffering, shame, and countless sleepless nights. It was an ashes-to-ashes peace. Following the global success of her interview, Jasmine became a symbol of salvation. People began to view her as the survivor rather than the angry reality star. Thousands of individuals who were suffering in silence, who had been shattered, deceived, or publicly humiliated, were inspired by her strength. Jasmine started giving speeches at small women's gatherings, discussing her personal story as a person rather than as a superstar. She would appear before them in plain attire, devoid of jewelry and high-end footwear. They were no longer necessary for her. As she would say, "I lost everything, including friends, love, and celebrity, but after everything was gone, I discovered who I was." Perhaps the true meaning of pain is to let you recognize what is genuine by removing what isn't. Her remarks struck a deep chord. Women wept. After each conversation, some gave her a hug. They saw a survivor instead of a star. Magazines started publishing Jasmine's story once more, this time as inspiration rather than as a scandal. The headlines say, Jasmine Pineda's rebirth, from reality TV to real strength. The world that used to make fun of her now paid attention to her. The world that shunned her now applauded her bravery. Jasmine, however, never allowed pride to return. She was aware of how risky it was and how quickly celebrity might corrupt a person's soul. She led a humble existence. The majority of her earnings were donated to help Panama's unmarried moms. She worked as a volunteer at nearby shelters. She also painted in her spare time, depicting deep oceans, vibrant sunsets, and shattered hearts that were healed by light. She would still occasionally think about Gino at night. With a silent acceptance, not with rage, not even with sadness. He was a chapter, one of the memories, a section of the path that shaped the person she is today. She used to think that love was something that was bestowed by someone else. She realized now that love was something you had to first create within yourself. Jasmine got an unexpected email one evening. It came from a little Colombian girl named Lucia. Lucia wrote, "People used to make fun of my appearance and accent, which made me despise myself. I stopped crying after watching your interview. I learned from you that I don't have to be flawless to be sufficient. I was saved by you." Tears were running down Jasmine's face as she sat there reading that message repeatedly. She recognized for the first time that this was what she really wanted to do. She wasn't on TV to amuse people. She had been placed there to demonstrate to others that falling did not mean the end. It signified a new beginning. In response, she wrote, "Lucia, thank you. Don't allow anyone determine your value. You are sufficient in your current state." Jasmine experienced significance, something she hadn't felt in years, as a result of that simple gesture of compassion. She was approached by a documentary filmmaker years later. They intended to create a short film about her courage rather than her disgrace. Jasmine first declined. However, the producer whispered, "People must understand that there can be sunshine even after a storm." She then consented. The title of the documentary was, After the Fire, Jasmine Pineda. It wasn't glitzy. It captured her actual life, including her early morning strolls, her teaching, and her quiet times of introspection. Millions of people watched in silence when it aired. Only Jasmine, honest and unvarnished, stating the truth, without any editing, drama, or music. She said a line at the end of the movie that left everyone feeling heartbroken. "I once sought celebrity in the hopes that it would satisfy my void. However, when others know your name, the emptiness remains. When you love yourself enough to forgive your past, it disappears." The video became viral. However, Jasmine had lost interest in the figures. She simply grinned, a modest, gentle smile. Jasmine strolled out to the beach that evening as the waves lashed gently against the shore. Her reflection glistened in the moonlight as she stood where the water and sand met. She muttered, "Thank you, God, for all of the heartaches that brought me to this point." There was no need for the ocean to respond. The quiet was peaceful in and of itself. She had finished her journey. Real, yet not flawless or simple. And in that authenticity, she had discovered something that celebrity could never provide: self-forgiveness, freedom, and eternal life. She turned around, took her time walking home, and took one final glance at the stars before shutting the door. Not a light. No cameras. Only Jasmine, the woman who braved the flames and emerged stronger than before.